Usually when we talk about grammar or really just learning a language in general, there's this underlying expectation that it's all just pure mechanics.
Right. Like it's a math equation.
Exactly. It's like, I don't know, like building a bookshelf from IKEA or something. You take a noun, you slot it in right next to a verb, you tighten it with a descriptive adjective, and there it is.
Yeah. You've built the thing.
Right. A perfectly functional sentence. It holds the books. It gets the job done.
Well, yeah, because it's structural. You're conveying information from your brain to my brain in the most efficient way possible. Like, the cat is on the table, or I need to buy milk.
Yeah.
Pure utility.
Right. It's a grocery list, but then you step away from the grocery list. You step into the world of ambition.
Which is a whole different ballgame.
It really is. You start trying to talk about your deepest dreams, your life goals, the things that literally keep you up at 3 a.m, and suddenly that IKEA instruction manual is completely useless.
Because you aren't just building a bookshelf anymore.
No, you're standing in an emotional minefield.
Absolutely, because the stakes have fundamentally shifted. I mean, when you talk about an ambition, you aren't communicating a neutral fact. You are reaching into your chest, pulling out a piece of your core identity, handing it to another human being, and desperately hoping they don't crush it.
Wow. Yeah, handing over your core identity. That is terrifying.
It is. And the language we use in those moments dictates not just how others perceive our goals, but whether we actually achieve them or, just abandon them in fear.
Okay, let's unpack this. Because if you're listening to this deep dive right now, you have goals.
Everyone does.
Right. Maybe you're quietly prepping for this massive career pivot. Or maybe you just want to finally master woodworking in your garage.
Yeah.
But sharing those goals out loud often feels incredibly clunky. Or worse, it makes you feel horribly exposed.
Very vulnerable.
Yeah. So our mission today is to explore this exact intersection. The linguistics of ambition. How do you find the precise phrasing, the specific grammar, and the psychological framing to give your dreams the weight they deserve? And how do you do it without sounding wildly arrogant or setting yourself up for a crushing public failure?
Well, what's fascinating here is that the frustration most people feel in this area stems from a total lack of linguistic tools.
What do you mean by tools?
So we have these massive, complex, beautiful visions of what our future could look like, right? But our everyday vocabulary just isn't built to handle them. Think about it like trying to paint a museum-quality masterpiece, like this stunning, nuanced portrait, but you only have 3 colors of paint.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah. You have neon yellow, basic blue, and brown. You have a rich vision in your head, but the tools at your disposal are just too blunt to capture the majesty of it.
That is such a visceral way to look at it, because in English, those 3 basic colors are essentially the future simple tense, the classic I will or I am going to. Like, I am going to take a data science course this fall.
Right. And we shouldn't entirely demonize the future simple tense. I mean, it serves a purpose.
Sure, gets the point across.
Yeah. It's the initial pencil sketch of that painting. It is direct. If you need to inform your partner that you won't be home for dinner because you have a class, I will take a course, is perfect. It is highly functional for transactional goals.
I hear that. But I have to wonder if it's really sufficient when we start talking about a massive lifelong guiding star.
Right, a true ambition.
Yeah. Like, let's say your goal isn't just to take a single class, but to entirely revolutionize your industry.
Yeah.
If you walk into a room and say, I will be a revolutionary, it feels, I don't know, it feels flat.
It does.
It lacks gravity. It almost sounds like a child saying, I will be an astronaut.
And that flatness you're hearing is a lack of what linguists call semantic weight.
Semantic weight. Okay, give me the explain it like I'm 5 breakdown of that. What does it actually mean in practice?
Think of the words you use as physical objects that you are handing to the listener. Some words are pebbles. They're light, they're easy to toss around, and they don't leave much of an impact.
Okay, pebbles. Like what?
I want, I need, I will. Those are pebbles. They convey a basic transactional desire. But profound dreams require heavier stones. They require boulders.
Boulders, okay.
When you shift from a transactional desire, like I want to get a promotion, to an identity-level declaration, you are handing the listener a much heavier concept. You are forcing them to bear the weight of your core identity.
Okay, so how do we verbally hand someone a boulder? Like, what's the actual vocabulary?
You use verbs that inherently carry more semantic weight, words like aspire. Let's look at the difference between 2 statements. Statement 1 is, I want to become a manager. And statement 2 is, I aspire to become a leader in my field.
Oh, wow. Yeah, the difference in the room's energy when you say those 2 things is staggering.
It completely shifts the tone.
It really does. If someone tells me I want to become a manager, my immediate thought is that they're just looking for a pay bump. It sounds like something you'd say in a slightly tense performance review, where you're just trying to negotiate a new title.
Exactly. It's focused entirely on the endpoint, right? The transaction. But the second one, I aspire to become a leader in my field. That does something completely different.
It sounds like they've done some serious soul searching. Aspire isn't a pebble. It really does have gravity.
Because aspire inherently communicates reaching for something higher. It implies a long, arduous journey of growth, not just a sudden transaction of getting a new job. But let's look at an even heavier phrase. Let's say someone wants to start a nonprofit organization.
Okay, a big life-changing goal.
Right. The casual way to say it is, I want to start a charity. The high semantic way to say it is, it's a long-held ambition of mine to start a nonprofit.
It's a long-held ambition of mine. Let's really pull that apart because that phrasing is doing an immense amount of psychological heavy lifting.
It's doing a ton of work.
Yeah. If I'm standing at a networking event, sipping bad coffee, and I tell you, I want to start a nonprofit.
Yeah.
You might reasonably assume I watched an inspiring documentary last night and just had an idea in the shower this morning.
Right. It's just a whim.
Exactly, a whim. But if I use the phrase long-held ambition, what am I actively signaling to your brain?
You are signaling a deep-seated, road-tested commitment. The compound adjective long-held is doing incredible work there. It proves to the listener that this goal is not a fleeting, maybe someday kind of thought.
It's permanent.
Yes, you are implicitly telling them, I have weathered the storm of time with this idea. I have carried it with me through different phases of my life, through distractions, through changing economies, and it is still here.
Wow.
It transforms the goal from a random thought into a foundational pillar of your existence.
It's like you're pouring concrete around your words.
Yeah.
You're establishing this permanent foundation. And human nature dictates that when someone speaks with that level of foundational certainty, the person listening is compelled to take them more seriously.
They don't really have a choice.
Right. They aren't just hearing a passing whim. They are bearing witness to a life's purpose.
And that commands immediate respect. But, and this is crucial, here's the dangerous flip side to this. Painting with those bold, heavy, identity-level colors makes us incredibly vulnerable.
Right. Because the higher the pedestal you build with your words, the further you have to fall if things go wrong.
Exactly.
Like if I declare to my entire extended family at Thanksgiving, it is my long-held ambition to start this nonprofit, and then 3 years later the nonprofit bankrupts me and fails completely, the public humiliation is terrifying.
The higher the semantic weight, the greater the exposure. And this is the paradox of ambition. You need the heavy words to command respect and make the goal real, but those same heavy words can become a psychological prison if the outcome is uncertain.
It's a trap.
It can be. So how do we navigate that? How do we share big dreams without setting ourselves up for unbearable public shame?
Which naturally leads us to the strategy of humility, and specifically the use of modal verbs. Words like could, would like to, or hope to. But I've got to be honest, I struggle with this concept. I really want to challenge this idea.
I love that. Let's test it. What's your hesitation?
Well, we literally just spent 10 minutes talking about pouring concrete, putting down roots, and making bold, heavy declarations. Now we're talking about softening our goals.
They are.
But in a lot of corporate cultures or highly competitive industries, if you soften your language, you get eaten alive.
That's the perception, yes.
If I look my boss in the eye and demand success, like if I say, I will be the top engineer at this company, doesn't that show the kind of aggressive confidence that gets rewarded? Does softening my words just make me look weak?
It's a brilliant question, and it's a trap a lot of highly driven people fall into. The problem with forceful, uncompromising phrasing like, I will be the top engineer, is that it often backfires, creating massive collateral damage both externally and internally.
Okay, let's look at the external damage first.
When you say, I will be the top engineer, how do you think your peers hear that?
Probably like I'm throwing down a gauntlet.
Worse. It sounds arrogant. It sounds like you are actively dismissing the intense competition, the intelligence, and the hard work of everyone else around you.
Oh, I see.
It implies that their efforts don't even factor into your equation of success. You haven't just stated a goal, you've created an adversarial dynamic in the office.
You're daring the universe and your coworkers to prove you wrong. You're essentially painting a huge target on your own back.
Precisely. And internally, demanding success creates a state of paralyzing pressure. If your identity is tied to the phrase, I will be the top engineer, what happens when you fail a single, relatively minor certification exam?
My brain doesn't just register it as a failed test. It registers it as a catastrophic failure of my entire identity because the I will was broken.
Exactly, because you left yourself no psychological wiggle room. This is where modals come in. Modals are not about weakness. They are about psychological safety and strategic grace.
Strategic grace. I like that.
By saying, I would like to see myself working as a lead engineer in the next 5 years, you adopt a judo move. You are still highly aspirational, you are still aiming for the top, but you are socially graceful.
You aren't taking up all the oxygen in the room with your ego.
Exactly. Let's look at a classic example from the creative world. Imagine a writer at a dinner party. Someone asks what they were working on. The writer could say, I will get this novel published. Or they could use a modal verb and say, I hope to get this novel published.
Okay, let's role play that dinner party, because I've been to this dinner party.
We all have.
If the writer says, I will get published, the people around the table might nod politely, but internally, they are probably thinking, okay, sure you will. Good luck with that.
Yeah.
It puts up a wall. But if the writer says, I hope to get published, it shifts the dynamic entirely. Why is that shift from will to hope so powerful?
Because hope implicitly acknowledges the reality of the journey. When you say, I hope to, you are communicating to the listener that you understand how the world actually works.
You're showing you aren't naive.
Right. You are acknowledging that there are gatekeepers. There are editors with subjective tastes. There are shifting market trends. There is luck involved. You are admitting that you do not control every variable in the universe.
You are showing them that you are grounded in reality, and paradoxically, that humility is so much more attractive to potential allies.
It really is.
If you act like your success is a guaranteed, inevitable fact, mentors and peers will step back. They'll think, well, this person clearly has it all figured out. They don't need my help.
But if you say, I hope to achieve this, it's my deepest ambition, but I know the odds are tough, suddenly you create a vacuum that other people want to fill. Mentors want to step in and offer advice. Peers want to introduce you to their contacts. People want to be part of an underdog's journey.
Wow, yeah.
By softening your language, you protect your own ego from the paralyzing fear of failure while simultaneously inviting a community to support you. It's an invitation to collaborate rather than a declaration of war against the odds.
That is a massive paradigm shift for anyone listening who thinks they need to fake unbreakable confidence to succeed. Soft power recruits allies. Brute verbal force creates skeptics.
Exactly.
But, and this is the inevitable pivot, while softening a goal protects our ego and invites support, hope alone isn't a roadmap. I hope to get published is a beautiful, vulnerable sentiment, but it doesn't tell you what to do when your alarm goes off at 6 a.m. on a Tuesday morning and the page is blank.
Right. A softened goal is still an abstract concept. And to actually achieve these beautifully softened, deeply profound dreams, we have to completely abandon the abstract. We have to leave the clouds and get incredibly microscopic.
It's time to talk about the architecture of action.
Yeah.
If you're listening to this and you have a habit of making grand New Year's resolutions that you completely abandon by January 14th, pay close attention.
Yes, listen closely.
It is so easy to fall in love with the idea of a goal. We love the identity of being someone who is learning a language or getting fit, but we hate doing the actual work. We have to break down these vague, massive dreams into highly specific, manageable, and trackable steps.
The contrast between a vague dream and an actionable step is jarring when you look at it linguistically. Vague goals use language that is completely untethered from reality.
The ultimate example of this is the person who says, I want to be better at English, or even broader, I want to be healthy. If we actually look at those sentences, they are functionally useless.
Yeah.
They are emotional pacifiers, not plans.
Because there is no finish line. The human brain cannot process an infinite metric. How do you define better? How do you define healthy? You will never wake up one day, stretch your arms, and say, I have officially achieved better, the journey is over.
No, you're setting up a game that you literally cannot win. The goalpost is invisible, and it's infinitely far away. You are just sentencing yourself to a lifetime of feeling like you're constantly falling short. So we have to replace the vague desire with a masterclass in specificity. Instead of, I want to be better at English, we need a sentence that acts as an architectural blueprint. Something like, my objective is to achieve a C1 level in the next 12 months by focusing on business vocabulary and presentation skills.
Let's deconstruct why that sentence is so powerful, because every listener should be applying this exact 3-part formula to their own goals right now.
Let's do it.
First, my objective is to achieve a C1 level. They have defined the exact metric of success. A C1 level is an externally verifiable standard. It's a test you can take and pass. It removes personal, emotional bias from the equation.
You can't wake up feeling insecure and think, I'm bad at English, because the certificate on the wall says C1. The metric is objective.
Second, in the next 12 months. They have instituted a timeline. Without a timeline, a goal is just a hobby you occasionally think about. A timeline creates urgency.
It's the ticking clock. It forces prioritization. If you only have 12 months, you can't waste an afternoon watching television without consciously knowing you are trading your goal for comfort.
And third, by focusing on business vocabulary and presentation skills, they have identified the precise mechanism of action. They aren't just going to wander into a bookstore and randomly read grammar books. They have a targeted methodology.
Right.
When you add a metric, a timeline, and a mechanism, you drag a wish out of the ether and force it into the physical realm.
I want to spend some real time on this because it's the crux of why most people fail. It's the difference between staring at a mountain peak from 10 miles away, which is overwhelming, and looking down at your boots and focusing on the very first rock you need to step over. Let's debate a few different domains of life because this applies to literally everything.
Let's look at language learning first. The vague, exhausting goal is, I need to improve my vocabulary. The microscopic architectural action is, I will master 15 new idioms related to business by the end of this month.
The psychological difference there is night and day. Improved vocabulary feels like a chore that will haunt you until you die.
It never ends.
But master 15 idioms this month. On the 30th of the month, you can sit down with a piece of paper and literally count them out. 1, 2, 3, 15. Boom. You get a massive dopamine hit. Your brain registers a concrete victory. You prove to yourself that you are capable of succeeding.
It creates a self-sustaining feedback loop of confidence. Now, let's apply this to fitness. This is perhaps where people use the vaguest language of all.
Oh, absolutely.
Compare the identity-driven statement, I want to run a marathon, to the microscopic action, I will run 1 kilometer today.
Oh, the marathon trap, I want to run a marathon, isn't an action. It's a desperate plea for a new identity. You want to be the kind of person who has a bumper sticker that says 26.2. You want to be a marathon runner. But think about what actually happens in reality. It's 6 a.m. in November. It's pitch black outside. It's raining, and your bed is warm. If your brand's objective is run 26 miles, the sheer magnitude of that task is so overwhelming that your brain instantly generates a dozen logical excuses to hit the snooze button. It's too far, I'm too tired, I might get injured, I'll start tomorrow.
The massive goal actually triggers a paralysis response.
Exactly. But if your goal is just, I will run 1 kilometer today, it is so ridiculously, embarrassingly small that your brain can't logically mount a defense against it.
You can't argue with it.
You can run 1 kilometer in 10 minutes. You bypass the overwhelming fear of the massive goal by lowering the barrier to entry so far that it takes more effort to make an excuse than it does to just tie your shoes and do it.
And the secret is, once you're out there running that 1 kilometer, momentum takes over, and you often do more. But the linguistic goal must remain small to defeat the initial friction. Now, let's look at the business application. The vague dream is, I want to be successful. The architectural action is, I need to onboard 5 new clients this quarter.
Successful is the most toxic word in the English language because it has absolutely zero definition. If your goal is to be successful, you could double your company's revenue, get a promotion, and buy a house. But if you open your phone and see a 22-year-old tech billionaire on social media, you will instantly feel like a complete failure.
It's a moving target.
Your metric is constantly shifting based on your mood and your environment.
But 5 new clients this quarter. That is a spreadsheet. That is a whiteboard on your office wall with 5 empty boxes waiting to be checked off.
It dictates your daily behavior. If you need 5 clients by December, you know exactly what you need to do at 9 a.m. on a Tuesday. You need to make sales calls. The vague goal gives you anxiety. The specific goal gives you a to-do list.
Finally, let's touch on the creative realm. The overwhelming abstract thought of finishing a novel versus the active granular process of working on character development for chapter 1 or outlining the first act.
I feel personally attacked by this one, and I know a lot of listeners do too. Every creative person has this someday project living in their head. But finishing a novel is a result. It is an outcome. You cannot sit down at a desk and finish a novel.
It's physically impossible.
You can only sit down and write a scene about your protagonist having an argument with their mother in a coffee shop.
Yeah.
That is the only action available to you.
If we synthesize all of this, there is a brilliant travel analogy that brings it all together. Imagine walking into a busy international airport, walking up to the ticket counter, throwing your credit card down, and telling the agent, I want to go somewhere nice.
They would literally call airport security on you. You'd be escorted out of the building.
Because it's absurd. You don't travel by declaring a vague desire. You choose a specific destination, you book tickets for a specific date on a specific airline, and you plan an itinerary. You figure out how to get to the airport, which terminal to use, what gate to sit at.
Okay.
Motivation in life isn't fueled by staring at a spinning globe in your living room and dreaming. It is fueled by ticking off the smaller mechanical goals. Getting your passport, packing the bag, boarding the flight.
So the ultimate takeaway for the listener here is a relentless, uncompromising focus on the doing rather than the dreaming. The dream is just the compass direction. The specific actions are the actual steps you take.
And this is where we have to pivot to the harsh reality of life.
Right.
What happens when you do everything right?
Uh-oh.
You meticulously plan the itinerary, you break down the steps into C1 levels, 15 idioms, 1-kilometer runs, you do the work, and then the metaphorical flight gets canceled. A storm rolls in.
You do the work,
Yeah.
and you still fail.
Exactly. How does our language adapt when these perfectly specific, architecturally sound plans completely fall apart?
If you are taking notes, this is the section to star, underline, and highlight. Because failure is the only absolute guarantee in any ambitious pursuit. How we articulate that failure, specifically the grammar we use to describe it to ourselves and others, dictates whether we curl up into a ball and quit or whether we learn from it and keep going.
We are entering the grammar of disappointment. And the unexpected hero of this entire linguistic toolkit turns out to be a grammatical tense that most people find slightly awkward and try to avoid. The past perfect.
The past perfect tense, I had hoped to, or I was planning on. Let's really look at the mechanics of this because it is surprisingly elegant. If someone asked me why I didn't go on a trip, I could say I failed to travel through South America last year. Or I could say I had hoped to travel through South America last year, but what is happening psychologically when we use that specific tense?
To understand it, we have to look at the alternative. If you say, I failed to travel, you are identifying yourself directly with the failure. The failure becomes the main verb of your existence in that sentence. I failed.
It sounds so heavy.
It sounds like a personal defect. It sounds like a tragedy. When you use the past perfect, I had hoped to, you create a crucial psychological boundary between your identity and the outcome.
I was reading some research on this earlier, and it made me think of this analogy. Saying I failed is like sitting inside a car as it crashes into a wall and internalizing the impact. You are the crash.
That's a great way to put it.
But saying I had hoped to is like stepping out of the crashed car, walking over to the sidewalk, and looking at the wreck from a safe distance. You acknowledge the crash happened, but you are no longer inside it. It creates psychological distance from the damage.
That is a perfect visualization. You are identifying with the intention. You are telling the listener, my past self held a positive, ambitious, noble intention. The world intervened, funding dried up, a pandemic hit, my schedule changed, but my initial intention was pure. It gracefully acknowledges a past plan that didn't work out without dwelling in the misery of the outcome.
It allows your ego to remain completely intact. It separates your inherent worth as a human being from the result of the project. I had hoped to. It's remarkably gentle. And there is another tool for navigating setbacks that is deeply tied to this, which is the strategic use of humor. Specifically, using self-deprecating humor as a resilience shield.
There's a wonderful anecdote about this. A person was asked about a past hobby, and instead of getting defensive, they smiled and said, I tried to learn the violin, but my family and neighbors collectively voted against it.
That is so incredibly disarming. And think about the social mechanics of what that joke actually accomplishes in a conversation.
It diffuses everything.
It really does. If you run into an old friend at a coffee shop and they ask, hey, are you still playing the violin? And you look at the floor, your face falls, and you mumble, no, I quit. I was terrible at it. The whole conversation instantly becomes awkward. The other person feels terrible for bringing it up. You've introduced shame into the interaction.
You've made them feel like they just stepped on a landmine.
Exactly. But if you hit them with that joke, my neighbors voted against it, you diffuse the tension instantly. You prove to the listener and to yourself that you can laugh at your own shortcomings.
Humor signals to the tribe that you are psychologically safe to be around, even in the midst of failure. It shows that you aren't fragile. You tried something difficult, it didn't work out, you found the comedy in it, and you moved on. You are still whole.
It's a brilliant conversational deflection. But this brings up a much deeper, more internal point about how we view failure when no one else is around. We can use the past perfect to sound graceful at a coffee shop, and we can use a clever joke to diffuse tension at a party. But what happens when we go home, close the door, and look in the mirror? How should we actually internalize the things that didn't work out?
This requires a fundamental rewiring of our internal narrative. We have to stop viewing rejection as a character judgment and start viewing rejection strictly as data. Rejection is just feedback.
Rejection as data. If you internalize that one concept, it will literally change your life. It strips the burning, shameful emotion entirely out of the event.
Think about the classic story of J.K. Rowling. Her manuscript for Harry Potter was rejected a dozen times by major publishers before it was finally accepted. Let's look at the psychology of that. If she had viewed rejection as a character flaw, if her internal monologue was, "I received a rejection letter, therefore I am a fundamentally untalented, worthless writer," she would have thrown the manuscript in the trash after the second or third no.
Because why would you keep touching a hot stove if you believe the stove hates you and is trying to destroy you? It makes no logical sense to persist if failure is proof of your inadequacy.
Exactly. But if you operate like a scientist and you view rejection purely as data, everything changes. A rejection letter simply says, this specific combination of words on this specific day was not a fit for the subjective tastes of this specific editor. That's all it is. It is a single data point on a graph.
It's just information. It doesn't mean you are a bad person. It might mean the pacing in chapter 3 is slow. Or it might just mean this editor is having a bad day. And I think this mindset shift is the only conceivable way to endure the long haul of any ambitious goal. Persistence isn't about having a thick skin. It's born from viewing failure as an ongoing experiment rather than a final verdict.
You adjust the variables based on the data, and you run the experiment again. But as empowering as this is, we don't live in a vacuum. We can reframe our own failures as data all day long, but we still have to interact with other human beings. And external negative feedback, especially from people we care deeply about, can still be a massive, devastating confidence killer.
Oh, absolutely. Let's get real here. I want to push back on this idea of the invincible mindset. We've talked about phrasing things beautifully with semantic weight. We've talked about softening goals with modals and being highly specific and handling our own setbacks with grace. But what if you do everything perfectly right?
Okay, lay it on me.
You construct the perfect sentence. You put your humble, specific goal out there into the world, and the people around you just tear it down. What if your parents laugh at you, or your spouse tells you you're being unrealistic, or your friends roll their eyes? How do we protect our aspirations from the cynics who share our living spaces?
It is the most common reason dreams die. And the defense mechanism against it is what we call building a fortress for your dreams. The primary strategy here is to actively cultivate a personal board of directors.
A personal board of directors, like you're a Fortune 500 company.
Precisely. Think about how a successful corporation operates. When they want to launch a radical new product, the CEO doesn't walk out into the street and ask 50 random pedestrians for permission. They don't ask their cynical uncle what he thinks. They sit down in a boardroom with a small, carefully curated, highly trusted group of experts.
And you have to do the exact same thing with your life goals. Your personal board of directors should be a tiny group of people, maybe 3 people. These are individuals who genuinely believe in your baseline potential, but who are also intelligent and grounded enough to offer constructive, actionable friction.
You aren't looking for sycophants. You don't want an echo chamber of people blindly telling you that every idea you have is flawless. That's dangerous. You want people who will say, I love the ambition of this goal, I believe you can do it, but have you considered this blind spot in your timeline?
So how do you curate this board? And more importantly, how do you fire people from it? Because if you're listening to this and your cynical brother is currently on your mental board of directors, and every time you share an idea, he shoots it down, you have to revoke his voting rights in your head.
It requires a harsh realization. You do not need, and you should never seek, universal approval. The need for universal approval is the absolute death of ambition.
It really is.
If you wait for everyone in your family, all your college friends, and all your coworkers to unanimously agree that your goal is a brilliant, risk-free idea, you will literally never take the first step. You have to linguistically and emotionally boundary the people who aren't on the board. You stop sharing the vulnerable details with them. You give them the past tense summary once the goal is already achieved.
You are the CEO of your own life. You take the advisement of the board, but you make the final call. And the ultimate truth is, the most important believer, the only one whose vote truly counts, is yourself.
However, there is a fascinating alternative to this solitary fortress-building approach. What happens when a dream isn't just a solitary pursuit, but is shared with someone else? The linguistics change completely. There's a wonderfully quirky example of this regarding a ukulele.
Ah, yes. The ukulele example. I love this because it perfectly illustrates how taking a dusty, solitary item from a someday list and turning it into a shared goal fundamentally alters its probability of happening. Imagine someone admits, almost embarrassingly, that they've always wanted to learn the ukulele, and the person they're talking to says, "Me too, let's form a mediocre band."
Notice the immediate shift in the energy of the room. We go from a lonely, intimidating, highly procrastinated task to a collaborative adventure. And linguistically, the pronouns shift entirely. We abandon the isolating "I want to learn" and adopt the unifying "we" and "let's."
Let's learn one song together in the next 3 months. Look at how much heavy lifting that single sentence is doing. It uses the architecture of action we talked about earlier. It's specific, it has a strict timeline of 3 months, it has a measurable metric of one song. But because it starts with the word "let's," it adds an invisible layer of mutual accountability.
It builds a microcommunity. When you say, "I will learn," you only have to answer to yourself, which means it is very easy to quit. When you say, "Let's learn," you are making a social contract. But what is truly brilliant about shared language is how it helps preempt inevitable hurdles collaboratively.
It acknowledges the pain before the pain arrives.
Yeah.
You might say to your partner, "We know finding time to practice after work will be really tough, but we can commit to just 15 minutes a day."
Let's analyze the psychology of that sentence. We know this will be tough. By stating that out loud, you are validating the struggle before it even manifests. If you are learning an instrument alone and your fingers hurt and you're tired, your brain says, "This is too hard, you lack talent, you should quit."
But if you've already agreed as a team that it's going to be hard, the struggle isn't a sign of failure. The struggle is just part of the agreement. You're telling your partner, when we get frustrated on week 2, it's not because we are failing, it's because the process is inherently frustrating. And we already agreed to endure that frustration for 15 minutes.
It transforms an intimidating, isolating roadblock into a manageable team sport. You create a shared resilience shield.
Now, whether your dream is a solitary pursuit guarded by your personal board of directors or a shared journey in a mediocre ukulele band, the ultimate fuel that keeps the engine running for the long haul is the internal mindset you maintain. Which brings us to the final and perhaps most expansive section of our exploration: mindsets, idioms, and the evolution of dreams.
The language we use inside our own heads. We've talked a lot about external communication, but internal communication is where the battle is actually won or lost. And we have a lot of colorful idioms in English that we use to motivate ourselves. Phrases like "reach for the stars" or "the sky's the limit."
I have to admit, though, when I hear "reach for the stars," my eyes roll just a little bit.
Really? Why is that?
It's the kind of phrase you see printed on a faded poster in a middle school guidance counselor's office. It's supposed to be visually inspiring, sure, but it feels so disconnected from the gritty, unglamorous reality of actually sitting at a desk and doing the difficult work. It's too abstract.
It lacks utility, which is why I prefer a much more grounded, practical idiom for ambition: playing the long game.
Playing the long game. Now that is an idiom with some real teeth. That sounds like a strategy.
Let's dissect how this specific phrase mentally prepares a human being for a difficult journey. When you encounter a major setback and you whisper to yourself, "It's okay, I'm playing the long game," you are immediately contextualizing your current pain. You are mentally stretching your timeline.
Expanding the horizon.
Right. You are acknowledging that there will be short-term sacrifices, lost battles, and frustrating delays, but that those setbacks are not signs of ultimate failure. They are just calculated, expected moves on a much larger chessboard.
It's the psychological difference between a 100-meter sprinter and a marathon runner. If a sprinter trips on the very first step out of the blocks, the race is over. It's a catastrophe. But if a marathon runner trips on mile 1, they just brush off their knees and keep running because they know the first mile does not determine the outcome of a 26-mile race. Telling yourself, "I am playing the long game," reframes your entire perception of time and failure.
It allows you to be patient with your own incompetence. And speaking of reframing, there is an incredibly practical linguistic technique for shifting our everyday internal dialogue from anxiety to empowerment.
Yes, the mindset reframing.
Yeah.
We need to talk about how to alter the sentence, "I'm worried I'll never finish this project."
I'm worried I'll never finish this project. Everyone listening to this has said some variation of that sentence. We have all felt that creeping dread in the pit of our stomach.
It is a statement rooted entirely in a fear of an uncontrollable future. It paralyzes you because it focuses your brain entirely on a potential negative outcome that hasn't even happened yet.
So we have to consciously rewrite the sentence. We change it to, this project is a massive challenge, but I am learning so much along the way.
On the surface, that sounds almost like a cliché positive affirmation. It sounds like something you'd read in a self-help book. But if you look at it linguistically, it is a highly sophisticated maneuver. Notice the first half. This project is a massive challenge. It acknowledges the reality of the pain. You aren't lying to yourself. You aren't engaging in toxic positivity where you pretend everything is fine when the house is on fire.
You're being honest.
Right. But then the pivot. But I am learning so much along the way.
You shift the spotlight from the unknown future outcome to the present moment of growth.
Exactly. Because here is the hard truth. You cannot control if the project is a massive success. You can't control the market, the economy, or the critics. But you have 100% control over whether you extract knowledge from the experience. You prioritize the variable you control. You guarantee a return on your investment regardless of the outcome.
And another deeply effective tool for controlling your internal narrative and keeping your motivation high is the practice of mental rehearsal, or vivid visualization.
I love this concept. Let's look at the language school example. Let's say someone wants to start a business teaching languages. They don't just walk around repeating the vague, empty phrase, "I want to open a school." They pair the architecture of action like, "I'm actively researching 3 different curriculum models this week," with intense, vivid, multi-sensory visualization of the end state.
They are closing their eyes and picturing the physical classroom. They are visualizing the sunlight coming through the windows. They are hearing the murmur of engaging students. They are feeling the positive, vibrant atmosphere of the space they have created.
It's mental rehearsal.
Yep.
Elite athletes do this obsessively. Olympic downhill skiers will stand at the starting gate with their eyes closed, physically swaying and twitching their muscles as they mentally ski every single icy turn of the course before the race even begins. When you vividly visualize the end state, you actually trick your brain's neural pathways into believing it's possible.
It makes it real.
You give yourself a visceral emotional anchor. And you need that anchor to hold on to when you are stuck at your kitchen table at midnight reading boring zoning laws for your new business.
The vivid visualization provides the emotional fuel for the mechanical steps. And this concept of vivid, highly specific phrasing applies beautifully to a domain that almost everyone has goals in: travel.
Travel aspirations are some of our most deeply held dreams, but they consistently suffer from the exact same vague phrasing as our business goals.
Yeah.
People say, "I really want to go to Italy someday," which is a fine sentiment, but a bland sentence doesn't light a fire under you to actually sit down, create a savings account, cut back on your expenses, and learn Italian.
You have to dig into the why and articulate it vividly. Instead of the generic, "I want to go to Italy," you say, "I want to sit in a small piazza in Bologna and try authentic handmade pasta, and then I want to stand in front of the Renaissance art in Florence." Or, "I am deeply fascinated by ancient history, so I want to explore the ruins of Rome."
The more specific you get, the more real it becomes. If someone says, "I am dreaming of exploring the ancient temples in Cambodia because I want to completely immerse myself in a culture entirely different from my own," they aren't just pointing at a geographic location on a map. They are defining the exact emotional, spiritual, and intellectual payoff of the journey.
And that's what drives you.
That vivid payoff is the only thing that will get you through the grueling reality of saving the money, enduring a 15-hour economy flight, and navigating a confusing currency exchange.
Vivid language breathes life into the itinerary. But as we near the end of our deep dive into this entire linguistic landscape of ambition, there is a final, profoundly important realization we need to address. It's a concept that applies to all these dreams, all these carefully articulated, vividly visualized, structurally sound goals.
And honestly, it's a point that gives all of us permission to take a deep breath and let go of some anxiety.
The realization is this: dreams are not carved in stone. It is perfectly okay, and in fact entirely natural and necessary for them to evolve over time.
I think we all needed to hear that. Because we can become prisoners of our own ambitions. We put so much immense pressure on ourselves. We curate the personal board of directors. We set the specific C1 language goals. We reframe our failure data. We play the long game, and we lock ourselves onto this rigid path. But the truth is, you are not the same person you were 5 years ago, and what you want today might fundamentally change tomorrow.
And that is not a failure. You might spend 3 agonizing years trying to publish that short story, using all the right modal verbs and specific routines, only to realize that you actually despise the isolating nature of the publishing industry, and you decide you want to collaborate and write screenplays instead. Or you might diligently train for that marathon, run the first kilometer every single morning in the rain, and eventually realize that running makes your knees hurt and you'd much rather be swimming.
Abandoning the marathon for the swimming pool is not a failure of the original goal. That is the necessary evolution of your identity. You gathered data, you learned about yourself, and you adjusted the trajectory. The only true metric of success in life isn't whether you hit the exact bullseye you aimed for when you were 22 years old. It's that you keep learning, you keep gathering data, you keep refining your vocabulary, and you keep moving forward. The destination is allowed to change as long as you are still in motion.
The language of ambition is ultimately a tool for self-discovery. It is a flashlight to help you find your way in the dark, not a cage to trap your future self inside.
And that brings us directly back to you, listening right now. Think about the massive toolkit we have just unpacked. You now understand the profound, boulder-like weight of saying, it's a long-held ambition of mine. You know how to use the soft power of I hope to protect your ego and recruit allies. You know how to break your overwhelming dreams down into a microscopic architecture of action. You know how to gracefully step out of the crashed car of failure using the past perfect tense, and how to rally a team with the word let's.
You are now fully equipped, not just to chase and articulate your own beautifully evolving goals, but to be fiercely protective of others. When someone else cautiously hands you the heavy boulder of their own ambition, you now recognize the vulnerability of that moment. You are equipped to be a powerful, supportive, constructive member of someone else's personal board of directors.
So what does this all mean for you today? We started this conversation by observing how building a normal sentence is usually like building a functional wooden bookshelf, but how talking about ambition is like trying to paint a masterpiece in an emotional minefield.
And we've seen how specific, intentional words act as the necessary brushstrokes. Some incredibly bold and heavy, some gentle and humble, some perfectly architecturally detailed.
But I want to leave you with one final thought, something to really chew on as you commute or walk the dog or go about the rest of your day.
Yeah.
We talked about how dreams inevitably evolve and how our failures are really just objective rejection data. If that's true, if the destination is always moving and the setbacks are just information, perhaps the ultimate goal of our lives isn't actually the final destination at all.
It's not the finished novel sitting on a shelf. It's not the marathon medal hanging on the wall or the language school finally opening its doors.
Exactly. Those are just byproducts. Perhaps the ultimate goal of the human experience is simply the mastery of the language of aspiration itself. The ability to continually imagine a better future, articulate it clearly, and bravely speak it into existence over and over again, no matter how many times the world says no. So I want you to think about this. How might actively rewriting your failed past goals, looking at them right now, not as shameful secrets, but purely as valuable feedback data, how might that completely change the way you introduce yourself in your very next conversation? The next time someone asks you, what do you do for? What masterpiece will you choose to paint for them?
It is a profound and powerful question to ask yourself.
It really is. Thank you for sitting down with us and exploring this today. Keep seeking knowledge, keep gathering that data, keep refining those bold colors on your canvas, and we will catch you on the next deep dive. So I want you to picture this scenario, right? You finally sit down to do that one specific thing you care deeply about.
Oh, I know this feeling.
Right. Like maybe you're opening up a completely blank document because you need to start studying for this massive professional certification. Or maybe you're setting up your workspace to design a new app.
Yeah, or drafting that terrifying email pitching a wild strategy to your boss.
Exactly. And you've done everything right. I mean, you've carved out the time, your coffee is sitting right there, the lighting is perfect.
The ambient noise playlist is on point.
Yes. Everything is absolutely perfectly aligned. And then, right at the exact moment you're about to take that very first step, put your fingers on the keyboard.
Yeah.
A voice just whispers in the back of your mind.
Uh-oh.
It's crystal clear, and it is just utterly chilling. It says, who do you think you are?
Wow. Yeah, it is the ultimate momentum killer, isn't it?
It really is.
That single quiet question just has the power to completely freeze you in your tracks. I mean, regardless of how prepared you actually are.
Right, or what your credentials are.
Exactly. You could have spent months getting ready for this precise moment, but it immediately shifts your brain from this, state of creative flow into a state of intense self-conscious defense.
It's just wild how our brains do that. So today, we are doing a deep dive into the psychology of creative growth, the hidden traps of achievement, and the incredibly practical tools required to push through what we all kind of lovingly refer to as the grind.
The daily grind, yeah.
And we're drawing from some phenomenal material today. Specifically, we're looking at insights derived from the Advanced Learner Studio discussion.
Such a great source.
It really is. We're going to tear into the paralyzing grip of imposter syndrome, the deeply misunderstood mechanics of habit formation, and we're also going to look at the totally unexpected and sometimes hollow emptiness that can actually accompany massive success.
Which is something nobody really warns you about.
Nobody. So our overarching mission today is to extract the most actionable mental frameworks and the specific psychological vocabulary from this material.
Right. The goal is basically to arm you, the listener, with the conceptual tools necessary to apply these exact frameworks directly to your own learning and creative journeys.
We want to bypass all that overwhelming, generic self-help advice out there.
Oh, for sure. There's way too much of it.
Way too much. We want to get right to the neurological and psychological mechanics of why we stall out, and more importantly, how we can force ourselves to keep moving forward.
Okay, let's unpack this, because I think we need to start right at the genesis of that paralyzing voice we just described.
Yeah, let's go back to that blank document.
We have to look at the absolute beginning of the creative or learning process. It's that intense internal friction that somehow manages to stop us before we even begin the physical work.
It's a concept that gets thrown around casually in corporate break rooms, and all over social media.
Oh, constantly.
But when you look at it precisely, it is terrifying. We're talking about imposter syndrome.
Right. And the precise definition is really crucial here because it gives a tangible shape to the ghost haunting the room, so to speak.
So how does the Advanced Learner Studio actually define it?
Well, imposter syndrome isn't just feeling a little bit nervous. It's the persistent, pervasive internal feeling of being a complete fraud.
Like you're actively tricking people.
Exactly. It's this deep-seated, unshakable belief that you do not actually deserve any of your achievements. And it's combined with this looming, paralyzing fear of being exposed.
Like someone's going to pull back the curtain at any second.
Yes. It's the conviction that your success is basically the result of a clerical error or just dumb luck. And it's only a matter of time before the competent adults in the room figure it out.
The competent adults. I love that phrasing because it really captures how small it makes you feel. And what is genuinely staggering when you dig into this material is how incredibly universal it is.
Oh, it really is. It spans everything.
Right. It's not limited to amateurs. You map out the spectrum, and it ranges from students sitting in a brand new high-level university class, absolutely terrified the professor will call on them.
Convinced they slip through the admissions cracks.
Totally. All the way up to the CEOs of Fortune 500 companies.
Wait, really? CEOs?
Oh, absolutely. You have people sitting at the head of a boardroom table commanding thousands of employees who are secretly sweating. They're wondering when the board of directors will finally realize they're just making it all up as they go along.
That is just wild. But that universality is a paradox, and it's exactly what makes that internal voice so dangerous.
How so?
Well, when the voice in your head says you're not a real writer or, you're not a real coder, it feels incredibly isolating.
Yeah.
It feels like a unique, deeply personal failing.
Like you're the only one who feels it.
Exactly. You look around the room and assume everyone else is operating on pure competence. You think you're the sole actor sneaking your way through the scene.
Wow, yeah.
But the framework we are examining provides a vital, fundamental reframe of this entire experience. And the pivot that changes everything is this feeling like a fraud is not evidence of actually being one.
Let's stop right there and look at that, because the default human reaction is to assume that if we feel something intensely, it must be true.
We trust our feelings implicitly.
Right. If I feel like a fraud, my brain assumes I am one. So if it's not evidence that I am a fraud, what exactly is it evidence of?
It's concrete, undeniable evidence that you are stepping outside of your established comfort zone.
Okay, that makes sense.
The imposter feeling is not a red flag warning you to stop. It's a neurological symptom of growth. It only appears because you have deliberately pushed yourself into territory where you do not yet possess absolute mastery.
So if you were only doing things you had completely mastered, things that required zero stretch, you would never feel like an imposter.
Never. You just feel bored.
So if imposter syndrome is just a symptom of growth, is it basically the psychological equivalent of muscle soreness after a really intense workout?
Oh, I love that analogy. Yes.
Because if you think about it, you wouldn't stop lifting weights just because your arms ache the next day, right?
Mm-hmm.
You wouldn't wake up, feel the burn in your biceps and say, oh no, my muscles hurt. I must be an absolute fraud at the gym. I don't belong here.
Right. You wouldn't cancel your membership over it.
No, you would recognize that the physical ache actually indicates the muscle fibers are tearing and rebuilding to become stronger.
That is the exact mechanism at play here. It is literally the lactic acid of the mind.
The lactic acid of the mind. That's a great way to put it.
The material actually highlights a very poignant example of a writer who is struggling with this exact paralysis.
What was the example?
The writer admits to feeling like they are just playing a part, like they are literally just waiting around on a stage for everyone in the audience to realize that they have absolutely no idea what they're doing with the narrative.
Playing a part is such an evocative way to put it, because it inherently implies you're an actor on a stage. Right?
Wearing a costume.
Yes, wearing a costume that doesn't belong to you. Terrified that a stagehand is going to accidentally pull the curtain back and expose you to the audience. It just captures the sheer vulnerability of trying something new.
It really does. And this is the moment you, the listener, need to do some intense internal auditing. Like, where in your own life are you feeling like a fraud right this very second?
That's a tough question to ask yourself.
It is, but think deeply about the project, the new professional role, or the massive goal that currently makes you feel like you're just wearing a costume. Identify it clearly in your mind.
And then what?
Right now, mentally relabel that exact feeling of dread as growing pains. You aren't an imposter. Your psychological muscles are simply sore from stretching into uncharted territory.
But, okay, knowing it's just psychological muscle soreness is only half the battle, right? Actually treating the pain in the exact moment it strikes is an entirely different challenge.
But completely, knowing it logically doesn't make the panic go away.
Exactly. We are constantly told to shift our mindset. But when you are staring at a blank screen and your heart rate is accelerating, a high-level philosophical shift isn't always enough to get your hands moving.
It rarely is.
So how do we build a tangible defense when that voice is actively screaming at us?
You build a highly tactical defense. The framework introduces a practice called the evidence log.
The evidence log. I have to say, it sounds like something a detective brings into a deposition.
Right. Well, it is supposed to sound clinical and objective.
What is that?
Because human memory under stress is entirely subjective and flawed. When you're stressed, you only remember the bad stuff.
That's so true.
So the practice involves writing down every single achievement you make, no matter how microscopically small it might seem to you at the time.
So give me some examples.
Okay, you finish drafting a single difficult chapter. Write it down. You get a vaguely positive comment from a peer on a piece of code. Write it down.
Just a vaguely positive comment.
Yes. You learn a single new skill, a new formula in Excel, or even a keyboard shortcut that speeds up your workflow. You write it down with the date.
So the separation of feelings from facts seems to be the linchpin of this entire strategy. Because we are notoriously terrible at judging our own progress, our emotions completely cloud our retrospective vision.
What's fascinating here is how human beings default to trusting their emotional feelings over objective, verifiable reality, particularly when those emotions are negative.
Why are we wired that way? It seems so counterproductive.
It's evolutionary biology. It wired us with a negativity bias to keep us safe from predators. If you remember the wrestling burst that had a tiger, you survived.
Oh, sure. So we hold on to the bad stuff.
Exactly. But in a modern creative or professional setting, that bias is crippling. The feeling might be, I am not good enough, and this project is a disaster.
Which feels very real in the moment.
It does, but it's an emotion. It's just a weather pattern passing through your brain. The fact that the verifiable objective reality that cannot be debated is something like, I have written 20,000 words.
Right. Or, I have consistently worked on this specific database integration for 3 consecutive months without quitting.
Exactly. You can't argue with those numbers.
So you are basically keeping a ledger of reality to directly counter the aggressive fiction in your own head.
Yes.
Because on a bad day, you will look at a completed project, a project that by all external metrics is a success, and you will still feel like you failed. The emotion of the struggle is so much louder in our memory than the tangible result sitting right in front of us.
The material frames this with a magnificent, highly functional metaphor. It describes maintaining the evidence log as actively building a legal case against your own self-doubt.
Building a legal case. I like that.
Think of it this way. You are stepping into the courtroom of your own mind, right?
Okay. Setting the scene.
And when the prosecution, which is your imposter syndrome, stands up and boldly claims to the jury, this person is a fraud, they have achieved nothing, they don't belong here.
You don't argue with them emotionally?
Exactly. You don't try to outfeel the feeling. You simply open your ledger and present Exhibit A, Exhibit B, and Exhibit C. You present the raw data.
But let me push back on the timeline here. What if your evidence log is tiny? Like, because you literally just started.
That's a fair point.
Let's say you just decided to learn Python programming yesterday. Your facts might literally just be, I downloaded the software, or I watched one 10-minute tutorial video. If the prosecution is attacking your identity, a 10-minute video isn't much as a defense, right?
Is the key here the consistency of the facts rather than the scale of the achievements?
Consistency is everything at the beginning, and scale is entirely irrelevant.
Scale doesn't matter at all.
Not at first. If your only verifiable fact for a Tuesday is, I opened the document and stared at the blinking cursor for 10 solid minutes without opening social media, that is still a highly relevant fact.
Just staring at the cursor counts.
It proves you showed up and faced the friction. If you log that you showed up and faced the friction for 5 days in a row, the consistency itself becomes the undeniable evidence. Oh, I see. You're proving you can handle the discomfort.
Yes. You are proving to yourself that you possess the discipline to endure the discomfort, which is the foundational requirement for eventual mastery.
And if we look at the long-term effect of this, maintaining this log does something really profound to your identity over time.
It actively removes the heavy emotional weight from the learning process.
Right. It takes you from being an anxious, emotionally fragile participant who is constantly judging their own worth.
And turns you into an objective scientist.
An objective scientist who is simply analyzing their own data and progress. You stop asking the terrifying question, am I good enough?
And you start asking the much more useful question, what does the data say I actually accomplished today?
Which is so much healthier.
Yeah.
However, I imagine the evidence log, while incredibly powerful, is ultimately a defensive tactic.
Yes, it is. It manages the acute symptoms of the self-doubt in the heat of the moment, like putting out a fire.
But to cure the root cause of the self-doubt, you have to look much deeper into the architecture of your ambition, don't you?
You do. You have to move past the defensive tactics and look at the absolute core foundation of why you're pursuing this specific goal in the first place.
So we are talking about the ultimate weapon against imposter syndrome. Deeply understanding and articulating your intrinsic why.
The core fundamental motivation behind the goal.
And it is vital to point out what this why is actively not. Based on the sources, it is explicitly not about external validation.
Oh, absolutely not. It cannot be about getting published. It cannot be about securing a promotion.
Right. It cannot be about earning a specific salary, and it definitely cannot be about getting a certain number of likes on a platform.
Those are external outcomes, and they are entirely out of your control. If your motivation is tied to something you cannot control, your psychology will always be fragile.
Because the market could just decide it doesn't like your work today.
Exactly. An intrinsic why must be deeply personal and entirely within your locus of control.
Give me some examples of what that actually looks like.
It could be wanting to explore a specific thematic question that bothers you, or wanting to deeply understand a complex system, or even wanting to create an aesthetic world you can escape into.
What was the core example highlighted in our material?
The example was a writer whose fundamental why is connecting with people on a raw emotional level. They basically wanted to make a reader feel completely understood in their own loneliness.
Wow. See, here's where it gets really interesting. Because when you successfully shift your focus from an external outcome to an intrinsic mission like that, it changes the entire geometry of how you defend yourself against that internal critic.
It flips the script entirely.
When the imposter voice shows up and says, you're not a real writer, or you're not a real industry expert, the defense mechanism is no longer trying to prove the voice wrong. You stop arguing on the critic's terms.
The defense is no longer, yes, I am a real writer, look at my massive evidence log and all my publications.
Right. What does the ultimate bulletproof defense become then?
It becomes, It doesn't matter. I don't care about the label. My purpose is to connect with people, and I am honoring that purpose by doing the work today.
You render the imposter syndrome completely irrelevant.
Because imposter syndrome feeds on the anxiety of not living up to an external label. If you discard the label, the syndrome starves.
It completely disarms it. It shifts the focus from an external, highly fragile label like, acclaimed author, senior developer, or visionary manager to an internal bulletproof mission.
Like connector, builder, or helper.
Right. If your core identity is a builder and you lay one single well-placed brick today, you have successfully fulfilled your mission.
It completely insulates you from the anxiety of whether anyone eventually calls you a master mason. You built something, therefore you succeeded.
But, and I have to push back here, we have to acknowledge the reality of the environment we operate in. Society overwhelmingly rewards those external labels.
Well, without a doubt, the world runs on labels.
Your employer, your clients, your peers, they care deeply if you have the title, the advanced degree, the prestigious publication, or the revenue numbers.
Of course they do.
So how does someone keep that delicate intrinsic why as their primary anchor when the massive storm of self-doubt hits and the entire professional world is loudly demanding to see their external credentials?
That is the perpetual tension. And that is exactly why the concept of an anchor is the perfect analogy here.
Okay, walk me through the analogy.
In a violent storm, the wind and the waves represent society's relentless expectations, the poison of social media comparisons, and the very real financial pressures of life.
Right, the stuff you can't ignore.
Those waves are going to violently batter your ship. Having an anchor your intrinsic why doesn't magically stop the storm. The wind still howls, the rain still hits you.
But what does the anchor do?
The anchor stops you from completely drifting away and violently crashing onto the rocks of burnout and despair. You have to consciously remind yourself of that intrinsic mission on a daily basis, especially when the storm is at its worst.
It grounds you when everything else is chaotic.
Exactly. And this brings us to a direct, uncomfortable challenge for you to consider. Are you currently chasing a label, or are you truly chasing a mission?
That's a question that requires some serious honesty.
It does. Think deeply about the primary thing you are working on right now, the thing that is causing you the most stress. If the label is permanently stripped away tomorrow...
Like if absolutely no one ever called you by that prestigious title.
Right. If there was no certificate waiting for you at the end of the semester, if you could never put it on your resume, would you still want to do the actual day-to-day work?
That is the acid test. If the answer is yes, you have found your intrinsic why. If the answer is no, you are highly vulnerable to burnout.
Because the friction will eventually overcome the desire for the label.
So let's assume we have our strong why locked in, and we have our evidence log sitting on the desk ready to go. The reality is the day-to-day work is still going to be extraordinarily difficult.
Oh, yeah. Having a good mindset doesn't make the work itself easier.
Right. Having a good mindset doesn't make coding a complex algorithm easy, and it doesn't make writing a 300-page thesis a breeze. The friction doesn't magically disappear.
No, the work is still the work.
So how do we talk about this intense friction without falling into a spiral of despair, or, frankly, without sounding to ourselves and our colleagues like we are just endlessly whining?
We have to analyze the vocabulary of the grind.
Yeah.
We need to look at how we linguistically frame our own struggles.
Linguistically framing.
Okay. The framework we are studying provides highly specific professional language to describe difficulty. It is about actively professionalizing the struggle rather than personalizing it.
I really need to hear some examples of this because when I hit a wall, my default vocabulary usually consists of me staring at the ceiling, sighing heavily, and saying, "This is impossible, I am terrible at this, I should just quit."
Which is very common.
But looking back, it's incredibly self-defeating.
It is, because language shapes our cognitive reality. When you say, "I am terrible at this," you are actively attacking your identity. Instead, the framework suggests using phrases like being in the weeds.
In the weeds. That's a restaurant industry term, isn't it?
Yes, it's a culinary industry term that means you are deep in the complex, tangled details of a chaotic service. You aren't failing, you are just surrounded by complexity.
I like that. It acknowledges the chaos without saying you're drowning in it. What else?
Instead of saying, "I'm stuck and I don't know what to do," you say you are grappling with a specific problem. You might say, I am grappling with the complex character motivations in chapter 4, or I am grappling with a severe memory leak in this piece of code.
Grappling is such a powerful verb. It sounds like a wrestling match. You are engaged. You have your hands on the problem.
Yes. The word implies a serious, active, muscular struggle. You might not be winning the match at this exact second, but you are actively on the mat.
What are some other linguistic shifts we can use?
Another critical phrase is recognizing when you have hit a plateau. This describes a highly common period of little to no measurable change after a period of rapid progress.
Instead of panicking that you suddenly lost all your talent.
Exactly. It removes the panic of, why am I not getting better? By labeling it as a known biological and neurological phenomenon.
And are there phrases for when you're just starting something new and it feels impossible?
Properly utilizing the phrase steep learning curve when acknowledging the sheer punishing difficulty of acquiring a brand new skill, rather than interpreting that difficulty as a lack of natural talent.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, the psychological power of this vocabulary shift is massive.
It completely changes your reality.
Changing our language fundamentally alters our relationship to the difficulty itself. Because saying it's hard or I'm stuck is incredibly passive. It sounds entirely defeated.
It sounds like the work is a massive boulder that has rolled over you and you are trapped underneath it.
It frames you as a victim of the work. But saying, I am grappling with this, is an active state.
It sounds like you are a competent professional actively analyzing a complex challenge rather than a victim being beaten down by a task.
It serves to normalize the grind as a standard, entirely expected professional phase of the work. It turns the difficulty from a personal failing or a cosmic sign that you should quit into a simple data point that indicates you are in the middle phase of the project.
I love how you put that. It's just a data point.
Think about the difference between saying, I am completely lost in the woods versus I am currently navigating dense terrain.
Oh, that's a brilliant distinction.
The physical environment you're standing in is exactly the same, right?
Mm-hmm.
The trees are just as thick. But if you tell yourself you are lost in the woods, panic immediately sets in. You freeze. You wait for someone to rescue you.
You give up agency.
Exactly. But if you say you are navigating dense terrain, you adopt the persona of an explorer. You expect your progress to be slow. You expect to have to pull out your compass, check your map, and hack through the brush.
Your identity within the exact same challenging environment shifts completely based purely on the words you use to describe it.
And if we extrapolate on the external benefits of that, using this specific vocabulary dramatically helps you communicate with your peers, your management, or your academic mentors.
It really does, because perception matters.
Imagine your director asks for a status update on a stalled project, and you say, I'm really struggling, it's just too hard, nothing is working. They are immediately going to doubt your competency and your resilience.
They'll start wondering if they need to put someone else on the project.
But if you reply, we are currently in the weeds, grappling with the database integration. It's a steep learning curve due to the legacy code, but we are working through it. It signals immense professional competence.
It assures them you are in control of the situation, even when your actual forward progress is temporarily stalled.
It proves you are in the arena, actively fighting, not crying in the locker room.
Right.
Okay, so we have established the necessary mindset. We have secured our intrinsic motivation, and we have adopted the professional vocabulary required to frame the struggle. Now, we have to deal with reality.
The fun part, execution.
How do we actually execute the physical work amidst the absolute unpredictable chaos of daily life? Because motivation and vocabulary won't magically add more hours to the day. We have to dive into the sheer mechanics of habit formation and time management.
To manage the execution, the material introduces two highly effective pragmatic mechanics: habit stacking and the concept of focus seasons.
I've heard a bit about habit stacking. Why are these so essential?
These are essential because relying purely on willpower is a mathematically guaranteed way to fail.
Because willpower is a finite resource. You wake up with a certain amount, and by the end of the day, it's gone.
Exactly. Let's look closely at habit stacking first.
How exactly does this mechanism bypass the need for willpower?
Habit stacking leverages the existing neurological pathways in your brain. It is the practice of anchoring a brand new, fragile habit directly to an already existing, deeply ingrained, non-negotiable habit.
So you're hitching a ride on something you already do automatically.
Precisely. The entire goal is to completely remove the cognitive friction of the decision-making process. The classic example in the text is anchoring a daily writing habit to the morning ritual of making coffee.
Okay.
Instead of setting a vague, easily dismissible goal like, I will write every day when I find the time, the stack becomes an ironclad rule. After I pour my first cup of morning coffee, before I check a single email, I will write for exactly 15 minutes.
The genius there is that the coffee becomes the physical trigger. You don't have to wake up, look at your calendar, and exhaust yourself deciding when you are going to write.
Right, because deciding when to do it is half the battle.
The sound of the coffee machine or the physical act of the cup hitting the saucer is the starting gun. Your brain doesn't have to deliberate, it just follows the sequence.
It works flawlessly because, as you mentioned, human willpower and decision-making capacity are finite, depletable resources. If you have to internally negotiate with yourself every single day about when you are going to do the hard, uncomfortable work, you will eventually lose that negotiation.
Usually around 3:00 p.m. when you were tired.
Always around 3:00 p.m. By tethering the new, difficult action to an automatic, highly rewarding existing action, like drinking coffee or brushing your teeth, you completely bypass the friction of decision fatigue. The basal ganglia takes over, and the sequence becomes automatic.
But let's look at the broader reality. Even with a perfectly optimized habit stack, time is still a brutal zero-sum game. You can't just habit stack your way into a 30-hour day.
No, unfortunately, physics still apply.
The goal you are pursuing, writing the book, studying for the bar exam, launching the startup, is going to actively clash with your day job, with your family obligations, and with your basic biological need to just sit on the couch and stare at a wall.
That intense friction between ambition and reality is exactly where the concept of the focus season becomes critical.
The focus season.
It is the art of radical prioritization. It is the blunt, mature acknowledgement that you simply cannot do everything at once, no matter what modern productivity culture tells you.
Modern culture definitely makes you feel like you should be able to do it all perfectly.
It does, but it's a lie. A focus season is a predefined, set period of time, maybe 3 months, maybe 6 months, where you make your primary goal the absolute top priority, outside of your essential, non-negotiable baseline responsibilities, of course.
Right, like keeping your job and feeding your kids.
Obvious.
And we need to be incredibly unflinching about what implementing a focus season actually looks like in reality. Yeah. It's not just a scheduling trick. It means other things absolutely have to take a back seat.
Something has to give.
It means you are consciously choosing to socialize less. It means you are putting your golf game or your painting hobby on hold. It means you are saying no to weekend trips. It is a conscious, deeply intentional trade-off.
The psychological relief provided by the focus season framework is profound, specifically because it addresses the immense guilt associated with poor work-life balance.
The guilt is huge.
Modern culture demands perfect balance at all times. By framing this intense period of work as a season, you are openly acknowledging that this is a temporary, highly intentional imbalance.
It's not a permanent lifestyle change where you are permanently abandoning your friends, your health, or your hobbies.
Exactly. You are simply stating that it is winter for those activities, so it can be summer for your specific goal.
But let me challenge the reality of that for a second. Does acknowledging this as a conscious trade-off actually make letting go of your other hobbies or your social life any easier in the moment?
That is a very valid pushback.
Because honestly, does the term focus season just give us a fancy, professional-sounding excuse to make us feel slightly better about the fact that we are sacrificing all of our free time and alienating our friends?
That is a highly valid, critical question. The truth is, the framework does not make the physical sacrifice any easier.
You still feel it.
You are still going to experience FOMO when you see pictures of your friends at a dinner party you declined. You are still going to miss your downtime.
So what's the point of the terminology?
What the framework does is fiercely protect your psychology. When you turn down that dinner invitation, instead of spiraling into guilt and feeling like a terrible, isolated friend, you remind yourself of the structure. I am in a focus season. This missed dinner is the calculated cost of my intrinsic why, and this season ends in December.
Ah, I see. The terminology protects your resolve by reminding you that the deprivation has a firm expiration date.
Yes. It turns a feeling of chaotic overwhelm into a feeling of controlled, strategic sacrifice.
The difference between suffering aimlessly and suffering for a purpose.
Exactly. So let's fast forward the timeline.
Okay, let's fast forward.
Imagine you have run the gauntlet. You have successfully survived the paralyzing imposter syndrome. You have habit stacked your way through a grueling 6-month focus season.
You grappled with the dense terrain using your professional vocabulary.
You maintained a robust evidence log. And you finally, miraculously, crossed the finish line.
You published the novel, you passed the bar exam, you successfully deploy the software architecture.
What happens the very next morning?
This is where we move into what is arguably the most surprising and counterintuitive psychological trap of the entire journey. It is the trap waiting silently right at the end of the road.
It really catches people off guard.
We have to look at the massive chasm between the expectation of what success feels like and the jarring reality.
Because the expectation is nearly universal, isn't it?
We believe, deep in our bones, that crossing that finish line will result in pure joy, unending ecstasy, and immense permanent relief.
You think you will finally reach the summit, plant your flag, and just bathe in permanent golden satisfaction for the rest of your life. You believe the achievement will fundamentally alter your baseline level of happiness.
But the reality is often drastically different. The reality is a phenomenon known as the post-goal slump, or more formally, the arrival fallacy.
The arrival fallacy is a profoundly disorienting phenomenon.
What does it actually feel like?
It is the intense, unexpected feeling of emptiness and melancholy that washes over you shortly after achieving a massive long-term goal. It is that quiet, deeply unsettling thought of, okay, I have finally arrived. I did the impossible thing, so now what?
Why don't I feel different?
Yes, why am I not incredibly happy right now?
It is so wildly counterintuitive. You sacrifice years of your life, you bleed for this one specific outcome, and when you finally hold it in your hands, you feel entirely hollow. Why does this happen? Why doesn't the brain just let us be happy?
The underlying cause is brilliantly simple, but devastating when you experience it. The pursuit itself is gone.
The pursuit is gone.
For months or years, that massive goal actively organized your entire existence. It gave you your daily routine, it dictated your habit stacks, it justified your focus season, and it provided a burning, intrinsic why.
It gave your days a rigid structure and a profound sense of meaning.
And the exact moment you achieve the goal, all of that stabilizing architecture vanishes instantly. You don't just lose the struggle, you lose the profound structural meaning the struggle provided. You are essentially grieving the loss of your own defining purpose.
This raises an important question, a deeply philosophical question about how we actually value the limited time we have.
Which is?
If the expectation of permanent joy upon arrival is a proven neurological fallacy, and the joy of actual success is incredibly fleeting, maybe lasting a few days or weeks at best, then where is the real value in doing any of this?
It's a bit bleak if you look at it that way.
The framework suggests that the actual value cannot be at the finish line. It must reside in the messy, deeply human journey itself. The striving must be the point.
Yes. The pragmatic solution offered to combat the arrival fallacy is twofold.
Okay, let's hear them.
First, you must consciously train yourself to love the process of the work, not just the fantasized outcome of the work. You have to learn to find satisfaction in the daily grappling.
Learning to love the grappling. That's a shift.
It takes practice. Second, practically speaking, you must always keep new, smaller goals simmering on the back burner.
Simmering on the back burner.
This does not diminish or insult the massive achievement you just completed. Rather, it ensures that you always have a new vector of direction and a new why ready to gently pull you forward. It ensures the psychological architecture of your life doesn't entirely collapse the moment you cross a finish line.
But wait, if we always have to have another goal simmering on the back burner, just to avoid falling into a pit of existential emptiness, do we ever actually get to truly rest and deeply enjoy the victory?
Feels like a trap, doesn't it?
It does. Are we just eternally running on a psychological treadmill of our own making, constantly terrified of the quiet emptiness that comes from having absolutely nothing to strive for?
That is the ultimate existential tension of being a driven learner, creator, or professional. Achieving a massive dream is not a linear path that simply ends in a permanent, peaceful sunset. It is cyclical. If you are listening to this right now and you are deep in the middle of the struggle, if you are exhausted, in the weeds, actively grappling and feeling like a complete imposter, you need to realize something profound.
What's that?
This exact struggle, this intense friction you are hating right now, is the very part of the process you will likely miss the most when it is finally over. The rest period after a victory is absolutely biologically necessary, but it is the striving, the reaching for something just beyond our grasp that makes us feel fundamentally alive.
So what does this all mean? We have covered some incredible expansive ground today.
You really have.
We synthesized a comprehensive psychological roadmap that proves the journey of a true learner isn't just about acquiring hard technical skills. It is largely, perhaps primarily, about managing the chaotic terrain of your own mind.
It's mostly mental.
We learn to recognize the paralyzing grip of imposter syndrome, not as a failure of character, but as a biological symptom of necessary growth. We learned how to utilize concrete, undeniable evidence logs to fight back against the overwhelming tide of emotional self-doubt.
We examine the absolute necessity of anchoring ourselves to a deep, resilient, intrinsic why, rather than relying on a fragile, external label that society can easily strip away.
We learned how to radically professionalize our daily struggle, using active, muscular vocabulary like grappling, which psychologically transforms us from helpless victims into capable explorers.
We broke down the vital mechanics of bypassing decision fatigue through habit stacking and the grace of giving ourselves permission to enter temporary, ruthless focus seasons.
And finally, we prepared ourselves for the disorienting arrival fallacy, understanding that the end of a goal often brings a quiet, unexpected emptiness because we grieve the loss of the pursuit itself.
Having the precise language and the correct mental frameworks completely changes the visceral experience of trying to achieve something difficult.
It takes it from being an agonizing, mysterious, and isolating grind and turns it into a deeply human, highly manageable, and intelligently structured journey.
It equips you with the necessary tools to not only survive the relentless friction of the work, but to actually utilize that exact friction to generate forward momentum.
Which brings us to a final, slightly provocative thought for you to take away and mull over today. We established earlier that sitting down at your desk and feeling like an absolute, undeniable fraud is actually a positive sign that you are stretching and growing.
Right.
And we just established that finally reaching your ultimate long-sought goal can actually lead to a profound feeling of emptiness and loss. If the very beginning of the journey feels like you don't belong, and the very end of the journey feels like a letdown, does that fundamentally mean that true fulfillment, meaning, and joy only exist in the messy, difficult, grappling middle?
It is a profound, beautiful paradox to consider.
Think about that the next time you sit down with your perfect cup of coffee and your terrifyingly blank document, and you hear that chilling voice whisper, "Who do you think you are?" Maybe the answer isn't to frantically try to prove you belong at the finish line. Maybe the true destination you are striving for isn't the finish line at all. It's the profound privilege of the grind itself. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive. Keep grappling, keep your evidence log close at hand, and keep moving forward.